Welcome to In Confidence, where what we share in confidence helps us grow in confidence. Not many people know this about me, but I am a huge fan of Korean dramas and K-pop, and I credit videos on YouTube of BTS as getting me through the pandemic. So today we're gonna have a conversation about K-pop, but it's not really about K-pop. I wanna have a conversation today about identity, belonging, what it means to see yourself reflected in the world around you. And even if you're not a K-pop fan, I want you to try to stay with us because your best friend might love K-pop, someone on your team might love it, your kid might love it, and you want to connect with them. But more than anything, this episode is about the forces that shape our confidence, whether it's community, preparation, and cultural visibility. And I am really feeling lucky today because we convinced Professor Grace Kao, Dr. Grace Kao, to come and be our guest today. Dr. Kao is the IBM Professor of Sociology at Yale University. She teaches some pretty incredible courses. By the way, I wish that she had been a professor when I was there. She's not old enough to have been a professor when I was there, but she teaches classes like Race and Place in British New Wave, K-pop, and Beyond, Hallyu, the Korean wave through K-pop and K-dramas, and she teaches about race, ethnicity, and immigration. At my 25-year college reunion, she gave a standing room only lecture, and I stalked this woman. I hounded her for her email address and kept following up to have her as our guest for today's episode. So we're gonna talk about how fandom shapes identity, what we can learn about the intense training that these K-pop stars go through, and how we stay true to ourselves in a world full of aspirational images. Let's listen in. Grace, welcome to In Confidence.
Thank you for having me.
This is a conversation I've been really looking forward to ever since I met you probably, less than 2 months ago. And
That's right.
I think I stalked you. I might have stalked you. I got your email address. I followed up multiple times. Thank you for making the time.
It's my pleasure.
Well, before we get into the content of today's conversation, we have a signature opening question that we ask every guest. What are you most proud of from the last 12 months of your life?
Okay, well, that's a little bit hard, but let me think. I mean, it was really fun to talk to the Yale alumni at the end of May, so that was really exciting. And then right after that, I went to Korea, and I had the opportunity to talk to lots of K-pop professionals, and I interviewed a K-pop boy group for actually 2 hours, which apparently is very, very hard to do, and that was exciting. I got to see quite a few TV broadcasts. And then I'm super excited because I'm sure everyone has seen K-pop Demon Hunters, and I was able to interview the lead, the Saja Boy's lead Saja Boy, Jinu, his basically the singer, the voice actor. I mean, he's really a singer. And there's actually very few interviews with him. There's a lot with the actual actors, but I was able to interview the musician behind the voice. So I was so excited. And I'm going to KCON next week. So KCON is the K-pop convention held by CJE&M. And I think last year they had like 5.9 million people watching it all over the world. But I'm not sure how many people actually attend in person, but it's probably on the order of tens of thousands of people. So I'm excited.
Wow. Where is that?
It's in LA. And I have a press pass, so I'm super excited about that.
Okay.
But we'll see what that means, yeah.
What do I have to be an assistant on your team to come with you next year? And I've been watching K-pop Demon Hunters, and I've been wondering what that lead singer looks like. So we're going to get into it a little bit because you're going to tell me all about him. Now, for those of our listeners who don't know who you are, can you tell a little about who you are, how you make a difference in the world?
Sure. So my name is Grace Kao. I'm the IBM Professor of Sociology, and I have an appointment in ethnicity, race, and migration at Yale University. I've taught at Yale for 8 years, and before that, I taught at the University of Pennsylvania for 20 years. So I've been a professor for almost 30 years. And a lot of my old research has been on race and ethnic differences and educational outcomes, a lot of stuff on immigrant kids, on interracial friendships and romance. But the last 5 or 6 years, K-pop has completely taken over my life and everything I do and everything I think about. So I'm sort of the K-pop lady these days. I think if you type K-pop and professor on Google, you'll get me in quite a few places. And I'm also a regular columnist for the Korea Herald, which is Korea's largest English language newspaper. And I've written about 50 columns so far. So yeah, I'm
You
excited
have my
about that
dream
too.
job. I wish 29 years ago when I was a freshman at Yale, I had been able to take your class. Can you give the names of the classes you teach at Yale?
Sure. So I teach a class called Race, Ethnicity, Immigration, and that's an introduction to race and ethnicity, sociology class. And then I teach a class that's a first year seminar. So it's limited only to first year students. And that's called Race and Place in British New Wave, K-pop and Beyond. And they basically get a music history from starting from ska and reggae in Jamaica in the 60s and all the way to present day K-pop. And there is a method to my madness. I also teach a class on the Hallyu. So that's a bit of K-pop, K-dramas, and a bit about webtoons. So those are my sort of main classes that I teach.
I'm just going to say this. When I was a freshman at Yale in 1996, I wish you had been my professor. Like, those are the coolest classes you could take. I might come back a few years from now and audit those classes if you'll let me sit in the background and take lots and lots of notes. Now, I want to tell our audience a bit about what happened when I met you. So I went for my 25-year college reunion, and I don't even think you know what was happening in the background. So we all get there Thursday and we get the brochure of all the lectures that are available. Every single person in my friend group circled your lecture.
Oh, that's so sweet.
And it was 11 a.m. And let's be clear, when you're in the tents at night, you might be imbibing some alcohol. You might, in our 40s, have a little hangover. And everyone circled it and said, okay, we're just going to down some coffee and go to Professor Grace's class. And throughout the first 2 nights of cocktails, everyone was talking about which class they were going to go see. And it was like, I want to see the nuclear particle accelerator. I would say 8 out of 10 people said, I want to go to the K-pop lecture. And
Wow.
I walked into your lecture. I sat in the front row. I'm a front row queen because
Me too.
Because you can see the slides,
That's
you
right.
can talk to the professor,
That's
you
right.
can raise your. On Broadway.
I'm totally there. I'm totally there.
On Broadway, you'd pay extra for double A orchestra. I'd pay $1,000 for that front row seat. And you opened your lecture by saying, I wasn't sure if anyone would show up. We had standing room only for your lecture. That was the coolest class I took while I was there for my reunion. I just want to compliment you on an excellent lecture.
Thank you. That's so kind of you. I remember you, of course. You were so nice and came right up to me and encouraging, of course. And, it's really hard because you don't know what, Yale alum could be of all ages. They could be young like you, but of course there are people in their 70s and older. And I don't know how a topic like K-pop or the Korean wave would, play to such a broad audience. You just never know. And also, I just felt like, there's lots of competing activities. It might just be fun to walk around campus, hang out with your friends. I'm not sure people would actually want to go to a lecture. And for the folks planning the weekend, they also told me, well, we can't guarantee anything about attendance, right? It's open, so people don't sign up ahead of time. So I was really, really happy to see so many people there.
Well, I will tell you, your lecture, and I went to 3 lectures while I was there. Your lecture was the only one where people brought their 8-year-olds all the way to 80-year-olds. And I think you've hit a nerve because I went to a lecture at Yale Law and it was folks in their 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s, 80. It was a very mature audience and the topic was aligned against that. Yours was the only lecture I went to where people are like, I'm going to bring my kids. And I'm 80 years old and I've heard about this K-pop thing. What is it? So compliments to you. I will tell you, my boyfriend had a hangover. He's Korean. And I woke him up out of bed at 10:30. And I said, put on a shirt. Here's a cup of coffee. You're going to go learn about your own people. And he took a picture for his parents. He said, I went to a lecture at Yale. And afterwards, he said, that was the best experience. That was just unbelievable to be able to tap into my own heritage and learn something new. And you just really made a difference in terms of the quality of our weekend there.
Thank you so much. It's really kind of you to say, like just, again, you never really have any idea. I think for all of us who give talks, some people are still nervous about giving talks. I don't really get nervous. I get nervous about whether people will show up. I think that's like my only source of nervousness. I'm not really worried about, well, I'm also worried about the technology, but I love to talk and I love to share what I know with people. So I always think it's a privilege to give a talk to really any audience, but to Yale alumni, it's just really, really a fun thing to do. So I'm really glad they asked me. And I did it that weekend and also the following weekend. And I have to say your weekend was, very lively group. So I had a lot of fun.
Yay. I love to win. So thank you. One question before we get into the topic of K-pop and everything that's happened is, how did you personally discover K-pop?
Yeah, so, it has a lot to do with COVID, but also happy accidents. I saw BTS on Saturday Night Live in April of 2019. They were the first East Asian act to be on SNL ever. So in their 40-year history or so. So I knew it was important. I actually knew almost nothing about K-pop, really nothing. And I watched it with an open mind, but not thinking too much about it. And I was really stunned and surprised about, how much I liked it, but how good they were, and that they really broke all of these stereotypes that the West might have of Asian men and Asian American men. It's something I've studied in the past. So, that made a really deep impression on me. Having said that, I watched it and then I sort of thought, okay, BTS is cool. And that was pretty much the end of that. It's not like I became ARMY, at that moment. But what really happened was, I think, was COVID. Just before the lockdown, I met someone at a conference, the last conference I attended, and he was someone that studied BTS. He was an ethnomusicologist, and he had been a drummer in that industry. And so I met him, and we kept in touch, and then it was lockdown. And I was also serving as chair of my department at the time, and it was not a fun time, of course, for all of us, but I think for any folks who are in charge of any kind of unit, it was especially stressful because students and other professors would express their frustration at you or at someone who is sort of an authority figure. I mean, chairs have no power at all, but people just were very frustrated, and it was a stressful time. And so for me, okay, I'll watch a few more BTS videos, and then you go down that rabbit hole, and then I realize that there's a huge world out there, and that's how it started for me. So it really started, during COVID, the beginning of 2020.
I have the same story, Grace. And I wanted to, when I heard yours at the lecture, I said, well, if I ever get to have her on a guest, I'm going to share the fact that we're all one big, amazing community that continues to grow. I have always loved Asian dramas. So I grew up watching Taiwanese dramas, and I had become obsessed with Korean dramas because I love Jane Austen, and it almost has that kind of Jane Austen-esque quality. And one of the things that happened is in February of 2021, I got dumped by the boyfriend I was with.
Oh.
My company, which is a fashion... Oh, thank you. Thank you for saying that. My company pivoted from making women's fashion and workwear to making hospital gowns and face masks in New York City. And then I had a hate crime happen to me on the streets of New York City. So all this was happening in early 2021. And somehow I rediscovered, everyone knows Dynamite from BTS. And I was alone. I didn't have a boyfriend anymore. I was sad at work. I had this terrible thing happening. And I just went down a hole of watching Run BTS. And if anyone who knows K-pop, and if you don't know K-pop, Run BTS is this incredible reality show that BTS produced where the members did funny things together. They competed in silly games. It was just so entertaining. And then I started to listen to every album, and I would read the translations, and I would watch old concert videos. And somebody on my team said, the summer of 2021 is the summer we lost Lisa to ARMY. I became obsessed in a way that's, I think, is healthy for my mental health and well-being. But on the outside, someone might say, what? And it transformed something in me because I'm a daughter of immigrants who came to the US in the 70s, and I always assimilated. I actually did not own my Asian identity. In fact, I only had white boyfriends. I tried to fit into white American culture as a way to feel belonging. And there was this moment during COVID where everything was happening, and I was like, I want to feel the Asian side of my Asian American identity. And BTS was part of that journey. And so I personally credit K-pop for giving me the power to essentially own a huge part of who I am and give me so much comfort in a time where everything was wrong in every plane of my life. And I say this to my Korean boyfriend. I was like, I might blame them too for the fact that when I was swiping on Bumble, I was only swiping right on Asian men. You're my first Asian boyfriend. And I'm his first Asian girlfriend, by the way. FYI, it's such a weird thing that's happening in culture. You know, crazy rich Asians, like all the things that are happening. I've never been prouder to be the Asian side of the Asian American equation.
Yeah, and for those folks that are listening who don't know what ARMY means, I probably should say that. So every K-pop group has a fandom, and the fandom is given a name. And so BTS fans are known as ARMY. So just FYI. So you'll hear Lisa and I refer to ourselves as ARMY, right?
Ooh, perfect segue into the first question. It's like you got the guide in advance, Grace. I want people to understand why people are so drawn to K-pop and why their fandom is different from other fan bases. Can you speak about that idea of fandom and go into that?
Sure. So, you know, I think for people that are less familiar with K-pop, a lot of Westerners will sort of say, oh, well, they're, you know, manufactured groups. Isn't it just like Menudo or New Kids on the Block or so forth? And I always tell people that it's actually a completely different system. So, you know, these groups, and backtracking a little bit, that K-pop, you know, we think it means Korean pop music, and of course it does, but what we're going to talk about, at least what I study, are the idol groups. So these are groups, usually single sex, single gender groups, and they're trained by their company. But I don't want people to think that Korea only has this kind of music. Of course, they have the broad spectrum, just like in the West, but we're talking about one specific kind of Korean pop music. So I think what is special is, I mean, there's many special things. The fans are devoted partly because when a group, just before they debut, the fandom is actually already given a lot of marketing materials and like firsthand close-up knowledge about the group. Some groups come from these audition shows. So that's one extreme. So there's something called Boys Planet. And so if you watch Boys Planet, you become, you know, interested in that group that will emerge from the show. For the last Boys Planet, there's a group called Zero Base One. And so by the time Zero Base One debuted, I think they already had something like 1 million followers on Twitter. So there's already a fandom established before any music comes out. So that's one thing. Another thing is just there's a lot of behind the scenes footage. They show them doing dance practices, how they shoot music videos, how they're preparing for concerts, what they're doing behind the scenes. And then, of course, Lisa mentioned Run BTS. Run BTS is a sort of game show format that BTS had for themselves, and that was shot in-house, and that's a lot of fun to watch, of course. I think they also do, you know, because they do lots of live segments with their fans can interact or feel like they're interacting with their favorite idols. Companies and idols themselves seem to be very responsive to fan feedback. And so that's sort of, you know, the environment. And the other thing is, on special occasions, so if it's an idol's birthday, they'll always come on a live feed and talk to their fans. It's sort of almost expected.
And these idols, one of the things I noticed is they'll cry. They'll talk about when things are hard. There's like a vulnerability where I look up to you, because I think most musicians or celebrities, you're like, they're on a pedestal. there are moments where they take themselves off the pedestal and you feel a connection to a hard moment in their life or a vulnerability. Is that fair to share?
Yeah, of course. I mean, I feel like, and this is probably one reason that BTS appeals to so many of their fans is that there's so much, again, footage, and not just of them behind the scenes, but, like they're on stage and they're crying, but they're not, trying to hide the fact that they're crying. And a lot of my students who are fans talk about how, there's an expressive, a different version of masculinity that is more open to showing emotions, and that really appeals to some of the fans. So.
Well, and I have a friend who's a producer on a national morning TV show, and she said, I've never seen the diversity of ages and people waiting in line to see K-pop idol bands come onto our show. And I thought, yeah, even I had that moment where I had to do the calculation that I'm not old enough to be their mother. I was like, I could technically,
I'm old
cougar. I do the math. I'm like, I could technically cougar RM if I really wanted to, who is my bias. I realized we have the same Myers-Briggs profile. There was like a whole thing where I was like, RM could be my boyfriend because he speaks English. But as a fan, I think about this idea of, it's one of the few musicians or, groups that I follow where I'm like, I could be their friend. Like, I really, if I saw them and we could be friends. Where I don't say that about Rihanna. I think Rihanna's too far above me. She's untouchable. She's too cool. But I was like, if I met BTS, I would lose my mind, but also I would try to be their older sister. I try to be their uni. How does fandom for these bands shape somebody's identity or sense of belonging? Because I certainly feel connected to you in a way that I wouldn't feel connected to another professor I met at college.
Oh, that's so interesting. Thank you for saying that. Yeah, I think especially for BTS's fans, again, known as ARMY, there is a sense that, we should help each other out, or, we have this insider knowledge of a group, and that there is definitely a bond there. So I totally agree. Going back to just the sense that they seem relatable, I have to say that, idols these days, I don't know if they did this back when BTS were trainees, but certainly now, they are given lessons on etiquette, and they are taught to be polite and kind, and, and not show a side of arrogance. And so that is something that they do learn how to do. And I know for a fact that if a trainee is seen as difficult, that is a reason to kick them out of the company. So it's not a small thing. It's a major thing. It's as important as being able to sing and dance and so forth. Just a way of behaving and a way of being kind to people, and not looking down on folks. So I do think that also makes the fans more likely to like the idols, because, as you said, they seem relatable, or, at least you could fantasize about perhaps talking to them one day. But of course, they're celebrities.
One of the things that, for those who don't follow K-pop idol bands, maybe the analogy I would make is, as the Swifties were trading friendship bracelets and making pilgrimages, and there's a kindness, I think, to being a Swiftie, because there's purpose, there's mission. BTS, for example, raised a lot of money for charities. They were invited to the White House during Stop AAPI hate movements. I was like, they're not even Asian Americans, right? There's really, I think there's a kindness built into fandoms. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, definitely. And I think, the practice of making little gift packets to give to other fans at concerts, of course, BTS fans do that, and lots of other fans as well. So when I attended J-Hope's concert, I had little packs to give out of, I'm a little bit crafty, but I just had stickers made and, put little doodads in and gave them out. But I received, hand crocheted keychains, bracelets, lots of really creative gifts. So that was really lovely to see. So absolutely.
What's the impact of being a fan in terms of, your life or people's
Right.
identities as you study it?
Yeah, I think, at least for a lot of my students and for other fans that I know, especially if you're Asian American or person of color, but I think especially for people that are Asian Americans, we don't get to see a lot of people that look like us in the media, especially in pop music. And the fact that Asian American men, there's a long history of them treated as not, viable romantic possible partners in movies and so forth, to suddenly have, not just BTS, but lots of actors and K-dramas, as you mentioned, lots of other idols that, there's so many of these handsome Asian American men. It has really changed. Everyone knows where Korea is. Like there isn't, when I was a kid, people might ask, oh, what part of China is that? Or, just no one says that anymore. And also if they see a Korean name, they're like, oh, is that Korean? Oh, that's a really cool name. So there's that too. And I think people who are Asian American, who are Korean American, they feel, it's a time where it's really fun to be a member of those groups. People think that, Korean food is cool and all this stuff. K-beauty is also on the rise. More people are taking Korean language in colleges, but also on with programs and so forth. So I think all of that, it's a nice time to be Asian in particular, but lots of folks from Latin America, from Middle East and so forth also really like K-pop. And I think especially in terms of the male idols, it's about this different kind of masculinity, sort of the opposite of toxic masculinity. But honestly, a lot of us just like to see the performance, right? If you watch K-pop group dance, I mean, their choreography is it's better than any other kind of pop music, in my opinion. Like if you watch them and then you watch another Western act, it's hard to watch, to be honest.
Well, that's my hobby is just so you know, my hobby is dancing, and I love like hip hop dance classes and things like that. So part of me, I agree with you. I love the choreography. I want to go back to something you said, which is I remember, and in our research, you had done a seminal piece of research about how East Asian men are viewed. Can you talk a little bit about that? And are you going to repeat that study now? But maybe share with folks, because that was I remember seeing some press about it. That was a really interesting piece of research you had done.
Yeah, thank you. So for about more than 10 years, I had a large project that looked at interracial friendships and romance among high school kids. And then we had data that followed them over time. And so in this work where we're really thinking about all the possible pairings and which groups are advantage and disadvantage, we noticed that Asian American men, so as I guess before they're men, when they're in high school, that they were less likely to have any kind of romantic partner, less likely to have friends. And then you also see this again when they're adults. Now, this is with quantitative data, so we can't ask people why they're choosing certain partners or anything. We just see the partner relationships. But it's clear from that, for that data set and from other people's studies, people have looked at internet dating sites and whether Black, Hispanic, Asian, white men, how they're rated in terms of attractiveness and so forth, that Asian American men are definitely disadvantaged. And so I started feeling very strongly that we talk about assimilation and whether some groups are doing better than other groups, but sociologists spend a lot of time studying, income differences, education differences, housing, segregation, all this stuff. On some of these measures, Asian Americans look pretty good. But, there's also the kind of acceptance where, oh, are you as likely to be asked to the prom as someone else, right? Are you as likely to be friends with other people? Are you going to be seen as the cool kid or the nerdy kid? And it was clear to me that Asian American men were disadvantaged on the social aspects. And so I always had that in the back of my mind. And again, that's why, BTS and other K-pop groups, but especially the boy groups for me, because to me, they're the ones that are breaking these stereotypes. And I thought about this when Psy came on the scene, right? So I think for a lot of Americans, the first time they saw a K-pop kind of person was Psy, right? Gangnam Style. But Psy is a chubby, not so attractive, at least not, traditionally attractive man, right? He makes fun of himself in all the videos. And so I told my students way back then that he did not break any stereotype that we had in the West of Asian American men. In fact, he sort of fit right in. And so to me, it was great to have something from Korea, but it wasn't earth shattering to me in the way that BTS or all these other groups are.
And I hope you replicate the study, because I am I always say there's anecdotal data.
Mm-hmm.
You can point to the reframing of my willingness to date an Asian man to 2021. And yeah. One of the things that I think a lot about and have had long conversations with my boyfriend about are, he's an immigrant from Korea. He came when he was 5. And he's the oldest son. And I said, you're one of the few people who understand how hard it was to be an immigrant. And the screwed up thing was, when you grow up with parents who don't speak English as their first language, at home, they're in charge. They're almost authoritarian. But as soon as you walk out the door, you have to translate English for them. You have to read documents from the IRS for them. And it's this weird thing. Like there was a weekend where he set his alarm for 8 a.m. And I'm like, why would you set your alarm for 8 a.m. on a Saturday? He's like, oh, well, my dad's going to go play golf. My mom has to go open the seafood market, and I need to call her an Uber. And I was like, I get that. Like, you're the only boyfriend that will go to Woodbury Commons and shop for discounted polo shirts for my mom because she won't let me pay full price at Bloomingdale's. And that day he's like, let's rent a car. Let's go. And I'm like, none of my white boyfriends would ever do this. He's like, I get it. Well, let's buy some discounted polo for my mom too. And it totally changed my perception. Thank you to K-dramas, K-pop idol bands. I hope you replicate the study, because I will be anecdotal evidence for it. Can we get into one of the things you said about, BTS being a moment? Why is it that K-pop crossed over, but Mando pop didn't, or Japanese pop music? Like, why is it this specific type of music that went to the top of Billboard? Because we can talk about Blackpink, we can talk about all of these other ones that have hit top 10 on Billboard, but you don't see the same true for Chinese music, Japanese music, any other form of Asian music.
Yeah. So I'm no expert on J-pop or Mando pop, so I don't want to, comment on why they haven't made it. I can tell you what I think about why K-pop appeals. And I do want to say that there is an opening. It's not just because Mando pop or J-pop hasn't broken through the US Billboard Hot 100 chart. It doesn't mean they never will, right? So I do think we want to keep an open mind to the possibilities in the future. But I mean, in terms of K-pop, again, COVID had a lot to do with it. Definitely BTS opened the door, but I always like to tell people that the first song that actually ever hit the Billboard Hot 100 chart was by the Wonder Girls. It's a song called Nobody, completely in English. It sounds like a Motown song written by JYP. And then, of course, we had Psy, and then there was actually not a whole lot of activity until BTS came on the scene. And, partly it's because I think one thing that K-pop has always done really well is that it always has a little bit of English so that people can sing along. And they're, of course, experimenting with how much English do we put in? If we put all of it in, what does that mean? Companies like HYBE, BTS's parent company, they're trying, they and other companies are trying to localize groups. So they have a group that is called Cat's Eye, which is from an audition show shot in LA, right? And with Geffen. And then they have a new boy group coming out very soon from Latin America. I think they're going to debut this month or next, very, very soon. And so that's one way they're experimenting with this. But I think the quality of K-dramas and K-pop is very, very high. I don't think people realize how good it is. The production is really good. The choreography is good. These kids practice like crazy, and they've been trained. I mean, before they debut, they're already professionals. Just imagine if we put, people through this intense training program where they're tested, and the ones that can't cut it are eliminated. It's a really, hard system to get through. So the people that make it through are really, really special and talented and hardworking, all these things. So the quality is really, really high. But, US radio still is unlikely to play songs that are in Korean. I mean, I think right now, with the exception of BTS, I mean, ATEEZ just got on the charts a couple times. K-pop, again, we talked about Demon Hunters. They have 8 songs, I think, on the US Billboard Hot 100 charts right now. And some of those songs have some Korean. So that's remarkable.
I was really struck when you shared the data around there are a lot of non-Korean producers and songwriters. There's English. And I think you and I had a side conversation about maybe also the influence of American troops during the Korean War. There's like a lot of exposure. And you said one thing which I thought was interesting in your lecture, that Korea is not a huge country. So there is an export mindset in terms of growing something to be global, is because I think it's a country of 50 million people. And so the market to support that particular level of production, you almost need to export it.
Yeah. So I think, again, the early companies were super, super smart. SM, the company that made the first boy group, they thought about exporting. They actually developed an idol named Boa, who they gave her Japanese lessons, and she was, made to perform for the Japanese market. So they've been thinking about this for a long time. There have been Korean Americans, Korean Australians, Korean Canadians. Right now, most groups I can think of have one member. Not every single group, but let's say at least 3/4 of all groups have someone, and they might have members focus on other languages where they can communicate a little bit. There's this great video that Super Junior made maybe 3 or 4 years ago where it's like a little ad, like, please come see us at our next concert. And they did it in 8 languages. And they have different members, of course, not, that some members their Chinese, Mandarin was better, and other members Spanish was better. But that shows how important this is, that they are always thinking about multiple markets and so forth. But of course, that makes it hard too, because you can easily have an image or a song lyric or some kind of iconic thing in the music video that might be offensive to a particular country or ethnic group. So that can get a little bit sticky for them.
Well, when you think about the members, because, there's always one member that's the leader. There's one that's the face, the good looking one. There's the one that's the more introverted one. There's the quirky intellectual one. Like, is there science behind how they choose all these archetypes?
Yeah. So I'm not in the industry. I only know from what I've, learned from talking to people. But I think what they want is they want someone for everyone. But yeah, you're right. Like they're going to develop them into different personality types and so forth. But not every company, people do things differently. So sometimes now I think the amount of rap verses. So for those of you who are less familiar, if you listen to really old K-pop, every song has a rap section. So even a ballad will have a rap section. If you look at it, if you listen to these songs over time, I think they're overall it's decreasing a bit. There are still like hip hop inspired songs, but there are more songs where there are no rap sections at all. So that's changing a little bit. Yeah. So I think the need for different kinds of folks might also change. But there are also companies that have certain styles. So people will say, oh, this company might produce, tougher kinds of images. And there are groups, they start out with a certain kind of image already too.
I love this idea of there's something for everyone, because that allows, and that's for those of you who are new to K-pop fandom, you'll always ask someone, who's your bias? Like, who's the one that, and I always think of your bias as almost like a personality test. It is actually, I think, a shorthand, because not surprisingly, my bias in BTS is RM, who is the rapper Rap Monster. And he's the leader, right? He's the person in charge. He speaks the English. He's, the leader. Versus, who's your bias in BTS?
My bias is J-Hope.
Oh, That makes so much sense, Grace. You're a professor. You're just all about heart and helping people develop and young minds.
He is so hardworking and such a perfectionist. Everything is planned. He's always early, he's just like so organized. So I really
He's the dance leader.
He's the dance leader. So I think RM called him the mother of the group. So RM is the father of the group. So there's that too. But I do appreciate that. But you're right. Like, and sometimes some people say, oh, they don't have. So if you like all the members equally, you say you're OT7. There's lots of fun lingo. But often in these groups, the leader is the oldest person, but not always. So RM is right in the middle. So usually the company decides. They might interview the members and they choose a leader.
Well, it's funny because if you are a part of Army and you ask the bias question, on my team, it's like, I think Claire's is Jungkook. It's JK, the golden maknae, the youngest, the sexiest, does cool crossovers, all English. And someone I met recently, they're like V, and I'm like, oh, you like V? Okay, I know who you are, right? So it's and what's interesting, you said to me in the lecture was, if you're a boy band, there aren't girls in the videos because they're singing to you. Like your bias has a section of the song that they're singing to you as the fan, not to a girl walking across the street that you're trying to hit on.
So I said this, and then also, of course, all these rules can be violated, right? So I thought BTS at the very beginning had a couple of videos with women, and then they disappeared. They had no videos with women. But now in the solo work, since we met, actually, J-Hope released these songs and they all have women. So it's like the maturing and maybe the westernization of this stuff. But traditionally, I think that's right. Like fans expect them to be single, and they don't, trainees for many companies aren't allowed to date. At least they can't date openly. Fans get really upset if they find out that people are dating and so forth. So there is this idea that their love, their number one love, should be for the fans.
Yeah.
But of course, I said this to you and I stand by it, but J-Hope's songs, his 3 solo songs, all have women. And he even kisses one, right? So that was like a big thing. Oh my God, a K-pop idol is kissing a woman on a music video. So it is very rare, very rare.
It is interesting also when I think about the crossover of the solo careers, the band careers with American artists. Like I think Rosé at Blackpink with Bruno Mars, Apate, and it's a Korean drinking song that now is taken off with the hand movements, or BTS doing Halsey and Megan Thee Stallion. And it's so fascinating what crossovers they choose, because it sort of creates more room for them to navigate through the world.
Yeah. And I think, in the past, the K-pop groups might have thought that the Western artists would give them a little lift because Westerners weren't as familiar to them. But I think now it's arguable. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. Like, who doesn't know who Jungkook is, right? So, I think if you were an artist and Jungkook wanted to do a duet with you, I imagine that person would be thrilled, right? So,
look, I think Bruno Mars did not need Rosé's help.
No. But
nothing Bruno Mars has ever done has crossed over to gazillion TikTokers of people doing the apate hand movement, right? That's like good for him, not necessarily good for Rosé. She might not have needed Bruno Mars for that song to still make it.
But I have to say, I'm sorry. The big thing that's happened since you and I first met is really this film. This Netflix film is just stunning. It's been number 1 for a while. It's number 1 in lots of countries. That the songs are doing
for
so
animated.
Fabulously. No, I mean for
but I mean it's animated. There aren't even real people in it. For people to understand K-pop Demon Hunter, it's all animated characters.
I don't know if anyone saw this coming because, again, 8 songs on the Billboard Hot 100 is not easy. And I think Golden is number 4 right now. So as I wrote in one of my columns that, basically the Saja Boys, this fictional boy group made up of demons from this film, they've had, they're the 3rd boy group that's had any K-pop, any US Billboard Hot 100 songs, right? It's BTS, ATEEZ, and then now the Saja Boys. It's incredible.
Well, they don't have to tour. So the good news
Oh,
is
they
they're
could
in.
tour. It's possible. I would say never.
Okay.
You can
Okay.
imagine. I mean, it's totally possible. They're thinking of, I think there's a possibility of a sequel. I mean, because there are real singers behind these people. It's not like a AI generated vocals. They're real singers, and who knows? Who knows?
All right. Well, they're in like a gazillion households, so they're already touring in a way. In your view, does K-pop fandom, does it promote self-expression and individuality, or does it create standards that fans feel pressure to live up to? Because, I think about celebrity culture of like, I look up to Dua Lipa or whatnot, and it creates a pressure because she's so beautiful, she's so perfect. Like, oh my gosh, I wish I looked like that. Do you think K-pop has that same level of, I want to look like that, or I want that?
Yeah, I think, that of course, there's that for them and also for the fans. It certainly celebrates only one body type, and fans can be quite critical. The men are also under severe pressure. So they're always talking about about dieting, excuse me. Like Jungkook said, I think he said he didn't eat for 5 days or something. I mean, they just do this stuff before videos, especially shooting videos. They don't want to eat or drink just before because their faces will look puffy and so forth. So, I mean, my personal preference would be to have a greater variety of body types and so forth, and you really see it in the audition shows. They have these young men and women, and they're all thin by regular human standards. And then once they become, when they're about to debut, they're all put on diets. Everyone looks even thinner by the time they debut. So it's really, really, really hard and difficult. But
that just might be like celebrity culture in general, and layered on with Korean culture, maybe just in terms of an ideal body type.
I do feel like they're under surveillance in a way that Western artists are not. Literally, if someone's leg looks a little thinner or fatter, in a video, people can be criticized for being too thin as well. I think it's actually more severe in K-pop.
Oh, well, okay. Well, that's like, I wanted to get into that because like, I love K-pop and K-dramas, but then as someone, our company is all about body image positivity. Everyone's beautiful. You bring to the table your own strengths and assets that may look different than others. That's the one part of K-pop that's hard for me to personally reconcile is it is a really unrealistic standard for healthy living, in my opinion. This is my opinion. Obviously, all of this podcast is my opinion. But the two things that I tell myself as I'm watching these videos is I admire the artistry in the dancing, the choreography, the discipline. Like they're almost like elite athletes. So I admire that part and I can get comfortable with that part. And the second thing is for some of the songs, the lyrics are so freaking beautiful and tap into something very deep, or the melodies, or that when I listen to them, it triggers a part of my brain that gives me comfort or excitement or enthusiasm. I'm like, that's like any artist. It's not specific to K-pop. Like I can say about other artists I admire. And I'm like, I have to like reality distortion feel. Well, I'm glad we could cover that just because if I didn't say it, we wouldn't be true to our values as a company.
Yeah.
You spoke earlier about how intense the K-pop trainee system is. One of my thoughts in life is the more prepared you are, the less fear you will feel when you go into intense moments, right? Because you've done hundreds of hours, thousands of hours of preparation. So the only block for you is to step out of the way of the preparation. What can this kind of training system with, there's obviously downsides to it, but if you were talking about giving someone confidence, like what about the trainee system does give someone confidence?
Yeah, I think I can only imagine that when they're going through it, you must not have any confidence because you're being constantly critiqued. Maybe that's what graduate school feels like sometimes. But I agree with you that once you have what you need done, like down packed, like you've practiced, you've prepared, and all you have to do is go out and perform, I've heard them say during interviews that they're not worried about the performance themselves. Sometimes they're worried about the interviews in English, right? For many of them for whom English is not their native tongue, that's a really hard thing, but they're not often worried about the actual performance because they've practiced so many times.
And resilience is certainly built when you're told you're not good enough. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure there's some level of collecting failure and rejection along the way.
Yeah.
If you're able to get through the system, you certainly are hardwired for adversity if it comes.
Mm-hmm.
I know this is not, we're talking so positive about K-pop. There is a downside where there have been folks who've taken their life or who've had mental health issues. And I know BTS in particular has talked a lot about mental health and well-being as part of their journey. How do folks think about that? Because you do see a lot of reports of like K-pop stars passing away or K-drama stars passing away.
Yeah. So one thing is, Korea as a country, for young people that age, they do have, I believe, the highest suicide rate. So there is, as someone who watches K-dramas as well, I've noticed that almost immediately that the talk of suicide is much more common. Sometimes I feel like you hear more about suicide than see the main actors kiss, right? Like kissing is less frequent than just talking about suicide. So there is something different in Korea in terms of that's a real social problem. So that's one thing. For the folks that have committed suicide in this industry and for all the mental health stuff, I mean, I think it is a really difficult industry. Just imagine that as an idol, you're trained, you're being told you're not good enough. You're competing against lots of people. They all seem like they're all, great dancers and singers, whatever, and everybody's motivated. And then you're just constantly competing against everyone. And not only that, your fans, some fans in particular can be really, really nasty to the idols online. So we talked about the positive parts too, but also, critiquing body image and so forth. And so, I do know at least companies talk about providing mental health assistance to folks that need it. And over the last few years, what I noticed that's a little more frequent now is people will take breaks and they'll say that, oh, this person's getting treated for anxiety. This person, is going through, some other health issue. And so they actually will take a little break from this business. But yeah, I can't imagine that, I don't know what being a celebrity is like, but I imagine that it's very hard. Like it's very hard on people's mental health.
Was wondering if like with COVID and Gen Z, I think in particular is really talking more about well-being and mental health, and if that's now influencing the way the training system is built or how these companies are operating. That's why I was like interested in it, just because it's so relevant to this. We always talk, there's 4 generations in the workplace. There's boomers, Xers, which I am, millennials, and Gen Zers. And I always say, thank you, millennials, for activism. And thank you, Gen Zers, for reopening this conversation that we need to have, because they had such tough high school and college years going through the pandemic.
Yeah.
I know we talked about K-pop's global rise. What do you think it's doing, and what you're studying in terms of the perceptions of just East Asian identity or masculinity or charisma or desirability? Because what do you think over the next 10 or 20 years it might look like?
Yeah, I think, this is where K-dramas are really important as well. The fact that you and I talked about this already, right? We just see more Asian faces all over Western media, in ways that I couldn't have imagined before, right? So all these folks that we've mentioned are spokesmodels for every company, you can imagine. Like you talked about going to Woodbury Commons, right? And I was thinking last time I was at a mall, probably a year ago, I saw a Gap ad with New Jeans on it. And this is in the US, right? This is not in Korea. So I'm like, oh, that's interesting. But of course, if you're in Asia, the K-pop K-pop idols and K-drama actors are everywhere. But for us in the West, it's just such a rarity to see these faces, and it does do something. Again, like I also have anecdotal evidence. I know people that are Korean men who, let's say, they went to grad school in the U.S. They haven't been back here in a while, and then they come back 5 or 10 years later, and they've actually told me that people look at them differently. Women look at them differently. Like they actually notice them. They're more interested in Korea. So there is definitely something that has changed. I mean, I can't measure it, but every story I've heard is along those lines, that people just suddenly, being Asian, at least some part of being Asian, is seen as cool, right? And again, K-beauty, it's amazing that people are equating things from Korea, beauty products, on the same par as, maybe things from France, right? So, yeah.
And this is like my journalist friend says, you never tell a journalist what story they should be writing. Okay. So Dr. Grace, I'm not asking you to do the study, but I would love for you to replicate that data set you did. I think it'll look different.
Yeah.
I think it'll be very cool.
Yeah.
It's like, you believe what you can see, right? So every time an Asian star gets a chance to be in a Marvel movie, a DC Comics, like Simu Liu, like it's a very interesting time for us to be seeing this happening, as I was born here. So it's very cool to see it. All right. I want to know, we have a really quick little sort of one question, kind of a speed round. If someone is coming to K-pop for the first time, what's the one song or band they should listen to that's like K-pop?
One song. I mean, I think it's reasonable to start with BTS. It really is. And I think I would start with either Boy With Love that you mentioned or DNA. But if anyone's interested, if you go to my YouTube channel, I actually have many intro to K-pop playlists. I have a 10-song version. I have a 40-song version. So you're welcome to use that if you wish. I have lots of different playlists.
What's the YouTube channel? Because I'm going to subscribe now.
No, if you just Google my name, GRACEKAO, you'll see it. It's just full of concert footage and playlists. So. Okay,
good. Next one. What's the one music video that people, because this is a visual medium, right? So you're saying BTS, start with something. By the way, Boy With Love is so easy to start with. Like, how can you not, that melody just sits in your head. What's the one music video? So, because you showed a lot of music videos in your presentation.
I did. Okay, I like 17's Don't Want to Cry, just because the choreography is so good, but they're also outside, so it's a natural setting. There's a really old song called One Shot by BAP, but that's shot like a film, like a John Woo film with alternate endings. So that's very cool, but it's not, I don't think it's a well-known song or anything. But since you asked about music videos, that one stands out to me. And then I think aespa, the first song, aespa is a group for women that they used to have like an Avatar counterpart, so that's actually fun.
Okay, and this is the third question. This one's for me, by the way. I loved that. This one's for me. What's the one band that I should be listening to now? Because I got to be open with you.
Yeah,
I love BTS. I love Blackpink. I'm a bandwagoner, right? Whenever you're like, oh, you're into K-pop, and I'm like, I really only know 3 bands. So what's like the one insider baseball K-pop band that I should be listening to now that will? Well, my team says you can't be aura farming. What's like the one K-pop band that's like newer that I should listen to?
I'll do one boy and one girl group, just to be clear. So one boy group, I like a group called Zero Base One. So I mentioned them already. Girl group, probably, I like the songs from a group called IVE, I-V-E. A lot of my students like a group that used to be called G-Idol, but now it's called Idol, I-D-L-E. So those are quite popular groups that I invite people to check out if they're interested.
Okay. And then I'm going to close out with, I got an email blast. I'm subscribed to Billboard magazine. And just so people, I think, understand the impact of it, like I think we all should be up to date on like things that are happening in culture. The subject line of the Billboard magazine email blast of the week was the 25 best K-pop songs of 2025 so far, critics' picks. Like, talk about taking over the weekly email blast of Billboard magazine, and that's the subject line. Does that surprise you, or do you just like, that's what's happening,
I mean,
folks?
I think that's from Jeff Benjamin or something, and I think he does it. He's done it before. I have to say, I don't really agree with those. I'm so glad that someone even bothers to listen to music because there's so many groups, and groups release so many songs. The catalogs for groups are actually really deep. I always tell people there are more BTS songs than Beatles songs, and it's hard to believe that, but it's true. So I really invite people to at least give it a shot.
Yes. And I will say, because it's the one that's like less on people's, I love IU. I'm obsessed with her because she's a K-drama star who started as a K-pop idol. I'm obsessed. And I think she did a song with Suga that is on my like most liked songs on Spotify. And I'm like, oh, that's such a good one. It's so pretty. She's so beautiful.
Yeah.
We've seen her grow up on camera.
Yeah, it's true.
Well, Grace, thank you so much for coming on In Confidence. I learned a lot, lots of things I didn't know, and you're just doing such important work. I'm so grateful that Yale has a professor like you, because I feel like if I had taken your class, it would have introduced me to all the things Yale wants to teach in terms of how we critically think and problem solve and consider things in the world. But it would have been really fun to do it with you doing it on this topic.
Oh, you're so kind. Thank you so much. I'm really grateful for meeting folks like you. And also, I'm glad that Yale allows me to do this. They've just been so open and wonderful and supportive. I even had a K-pop conference last year that Yale sponsored. So again,
well, can I come to, if you do it again, can I come?
Of course you can come.
New Haven is a train ride away, and I'd love to be able to say that I went to a K-pop conference at Yale. Thank you so much, Grace.
Thank you for everything.
I hope you've enjoyed this episode of In Confidence. I hope you're leaving this space, if not stronger, more educated about K-pop in general. Whether you've been to a K-pop concert or you couldn't name a single idol, I hope this conversation has helped you understand a part of the world that's got such important impact. Just look at the Billboard Hot 100 charts this week. K-pop Demon Hunter is the #1 show on Netflix, and I believe 6 of those songs from that show have charted on the Billboard Hot 100. This whole episode for me was not about a unachievable celebrity status or becoming someone else. I think it's really about recognizing the stories, communities, and representations that help us come home to who we really are. It's plural, and I love that the music world has become not a singular way of seeing the world, but a plural way, especially one when a group of Korean men can be #1 on the charts. Sometimes seeing a range of ways to be powerful or expressive gives us permission to show up as ourselves. If you love this episode, I hope you'll share it with someone who needs to hear it today. Subscribe so you never miss a moment of inspiration. And until next time, in the words of my 9-year-old self, I see you, I value you, and I believe in you. This is In Confidence.